You ever have that one moment where you look at your car, your pride and joy, and you just know somebody messed with it? That gut-wrenching twist in your stomach that tells you something is wrong before your eyes even see the scratches or dents? That's exactly what happened to me one late Saturday evening. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect the entire nightmare that followed to end with someone actually being put under house arrest. Let me take you back, because this story didn't start with broken glass or key scratches. It started with arrogance, entitlement, and one spoiled brat behind the wheel of a shiny BMW his daddy bought him. The neighborhood had been dealing with him for months. Loud engines at 2 a.m., reckless driving down our street, blasting music so hard that even the windows rattled. People complained, homeowners association tried to step in, even the cops gave warnings. But when a kid grows up thinking consequences don't apply to him, warnings don't mean a thing. And when that kid finally decided to make me his target, I realized I was going to have to fight fire with fire, but in the smartest way possible. Because trust me, when you go up against someone with money and connections, one wrong move, and you're the one who ends up in trouble. But before I get to how this kid went from bragging about his BMW to wearing an ankle monitor, let me tell you what happened that night. I parked my car outside my house like I always do. It wasn't some flashy sports car, but it was mine, and I had worked hard for it. Every upgrade, every maintenance bill, every hour of overtime at work had gone into keeping that car running smooth and looking good. So when I stepped outside and noticed the faint glimmer of a key scratch running all the way down the side, my heart sank. At first, I thought maybe it was some random vandalism. Kids sometimes act dumb, right? But then I saw him. That brat, leaning against his BMW across the street, smirking like he had just scored the winning touchdown. He didn't even try to hide it. In fact, he lifted his phone and made sure I noticed him recording my reaction. That's when it clicked. This wasn't random, it was personal. He wanted me to see, wanted me to blow up so he could catch it on camera. That's the kind of smug game he liked to play. And in that instant, I felt the anger boiling up, but I knew better than to give him the show he wanted. So I clenched my fists, turned back to my car, and silently swore that if he thought this was the end of it, he had no idea who he was messing with. The thing about rage is that it can either control you or fuel you. And in that moment, standing in front of my freshly scratched car while that smug kid smirked across the street, I decided it wasn't going to control me. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me yelling, throwing a fit, maybe even coming at him so he could play the victim later, show his dad and the cops a video of me losing it. But instead, I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and calmly documented every inch of damage. The more I walked around my car with the camera rolling, narrating the scratch, pointing out that it hadn't been there earlier, the more his grin faltered. He probably realized in that moment that I wasn't falling into his trap. Still, he leaned on that BMW like a king on his throne, one hand flicking his keys, the other holding his phone, pretending to scroll like he didn't care. But his eyes? They were locked on me, waiting. I finished my video, pocketed my phone, and simply said across the street, "Nice car, hope your daddy's proud." And I walked back inside. Oh, I could feel him burning with confusion. He wanted fireworks, not silence. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to fight this battle in the street. I was going to fight it smart. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that scratch. My car wasn't just transportation. It was a piece of me, years of labor and care. And now it had been turned into a toy in some spoiled kid's game. I wanted justice, but more than that, I wanted him to learn that money and arrogance don't erase consequences. So I dug deep. I checked my home security cameras, called up a couple neighbors, and sure enough, I had what I needed. Multiple angles. Clear footage of him walking up to my car, keys in hand, dragging it across the paint while smirking at his phone. He wasn't even subtle about it. He wanted to be caught because he thought nothing would happen to him. He was wrong. I compiled everything, time-stamped, labeled, and by the next morning I was sitting in the police station filing a report. The officer who took my statement actually sighed when I mentioned his name. Turns out, I wasn't the first. Complaints had stacked up, noise, reckless driving, even harassment. But every time his dad's influence pulled strings. I could see the doubt in the officer's eyes, like he wanted to help but didn't think it would stick. Still, he promised to add my evidence to the pile. I went home feeling frustrated, but also determined. The brat must have noticed I'd gone to the cops because later that day, he revved his BMW outside my house for a full 5 minutes, just sitting there, blasting his exhaust until the street echoed. Neighbors peeked out, shaking their heads, but no one said a word. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Because what he didn't realize was that while he was busy trying to intimidate me, I was 2 steps ahead. I had already sent copies of the footage to my insurance, my lawyer cousin, and even the homeowners association. And then something unexpected happened. One of my neighbors, an older man who had lived on the block for decades, came over and handed me his own flash drive. "Check this out," he said. Turns out he'd been recording the brat for months, not just scratching cars, but speeding through the neighborhood, nearly hitting kids on bikes, even harassing delivery drivers. The guy had an entire library of evidence, neatly organized. My case just went from one scratch to a pattern of criminal behavior. And that's when I knew the brat was in real trouble. When I tell you the neighbor's flash drive was gold, I mean it. I stayed up half the night going through the files, and what I saw was jaw-dropping. This brat had been treating the entire street like his personal racetrack. There were clips of him fishtailing out of the cul-de-sac, nearly clipping parked cars, blowing through stop signs, and laughing while leaning out of his window with music blaring. There was one especially chilling video of him almost running over a little kid chasing a basketball into the street, and instead of braking, he swerved and honked like it was funny. Watching that, my blood boiled. This wasn't just a punk, kid keying cars. This was someone who thought human lives were beneath his ego. Every new clip I watched felt like another nail in his coffin. And by the time I was done, I knew we weren't just talking about vandalism anymore. We were talking reckless endangerment, harassment, destruction of property, and intimidation. The next morning, I called the police again. This time, I brought everything: my footage, the neighbor's library, written statements from 2 other neighbors who'd had their fences smashed or tires slashed. When the officer saw the mountain of evidence, he raised his eyebrows and said, "This is more than a noise complaint now." He promised to escalate it to the prosecutor's office. Still, I'd seen how this brat's dad bailed him out of everything, so part of me stayed skeptical. That afternoon, as if the universe wanted to prove my point, I caught the brat doing donuts in the middle of the street, tires screeching, smoke rising, engine roaring, and guess what? He had his phone out, live streaming it like some kind of rock star. My jaw dropped because he wasn't even trying to hide his crimes anymore. He was broadcasting them. Of course, I screen recorded everything. At that moment, it clicked for me. His arrogance was my best weapon. The more he bragged, the more rope he gave himself to hang with. Days passed, and I could tell he was starting to get nervous. Instead of smirking at me across the street, he'd glare. His revving sessions got shorter. He still tried to intimidate me, but now there was a twitch of uncertainty in his body language. And then one morning, I looked out my window and saw the flashing lights. Police cruisers pulled up in front of his house. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. But then I watched as uniformed officers walked up to the brat, cuffed him right there on his own lawn, and shoved him in the back of a squad car while his BMW sat gleaming in the driveway. He shouted, "Of course," screamed about how his dad would end careers and how we'd all regret this. But the neighborhood? They stepped outside, silent, watching, and I swear I saw some people smiling. It felt like justice was finally knocking on his door. But here's the thing. His arrest wasn't the end. Oh no, this brat's story wasn't finished yet, because money still talks, and his dad tried everything. The kid got bailed out within hours. I thought he'd be back to tormenting us, maybe even angrier now that we dared to challenge him. But something had changed. The court wasn't letting this slide anymore. The prosecutor had seen enough of the footage, heard enough from witnesses, and decided to press real charges. Vandalism, reckless driving, harassment, and even an assault charge tied to that near miss with the child. And when the judge looked at the evidence, she made a ruling that shocked the brat more than anyone. Pending trial, he would remain under house arrest. The smirk was gone now. Instead of revving his BMW at 2 a.m., he was stuck indoors with an ankle monitor, pacing behind his curtains while the entire neighborhood breathed a little easier. You would think house arrest might humble a kid. You'd think being forced to trade late-night street races for staring at four walls with an ankle monitor strapped to his leg would knock some sense into him. But entitlement is a disease that doesn't heal quickly. The first week he still tried to posture. I'd catch him glaring through his blinds, pacing like a caged animal. His BMW sat in the driveway gathering dust, the symbol of his downfall right in front of him. He couldn't drive it, couldn't flaunt it, couldn't rev the engine to remind everyone he owned the street. And I have to admit, every time I walked past and saw that shiny machine going nowhere, I smiled a little. But the brat wasn't done trying to salvage his reputation. Word spread through the neighborhood that he was posting on social media, playing victim, claiming we had framed him, spinning stories about jealous neighbors targeting him because he had a better car and a better life. His followers ate it up at first, but then reality crashed down when someone leaked the actual footage. Clip after clip of his reckless driving, his vandalism, his arrogant smirks as he caused chaos. The internet doesn't forgive arrogance easily, and within days his reputation tanked. Even kids who once envied him started roasting him online. The brat who thought he was untouchable was now a meme, the BMW king who got dethroned by his own stupidity. Inside the neighborhood, things shifted. People who had stayed silent before finally spoke up. More neighbors filed reports, shared stories, and added to the mountain of complaints. With every passing week, his case grew heavier. His dad, the man who had always pulled strings, suddenly seemed powerless. Influence works in whispers, but video evidence screams. And this time, the screams were too loud to ignore. Court hearings dragged on, but the brat remained confined to his home, forbidden from driving, his license suspended. Imagine being 19, with the world at your feet, a car worth more than some people's houses, and instead of freedom, you're stuck under watch like a child on punishment. That's where arrogance landed him, and I'll admit, it was satisfying. To see him lose the one thing he valued most, not the car itself, but the ability to use it as a weapon of status. His BMW became a useless hunk of metal, a reminder that even privilege has limits when you push too far. Months went by, and life on our street felt normal again. Kids could ride their bikes without fear of being run off the road. Delivery drivers stopped hesitating to pull into our block. Neighbors smiled more, talked more, and the tension that Brat had built like smog finally lifted. It was peace we hadn't known in a long time, and then came the day of his sentencing. We all knew he wouldn't see jail time. His dad's. Money would guarantee that, but even money couldn't erase everything. The judge looked him in the eye and laid it out: restitution for the damages, mandatory community service, extended probation, and his driving privileges revoked for over a year. The brat's face turned pale. That car he loved so much, the car that made him feel like a king, was now nothing more than a paperweight. I remember walking past his house afterward, and for the first time he didn't glare. He just sat on the porch, staring blankly, ankle monitor still blinking at his leg. It wasn't joy I felt. It was closure. Looking back now, I realized this wasn't just about a scratch on my car. It was about standing up to arrogance, about showing that no matter how much someone thinks they're above consequences, there's always a limit. And maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call he needed. Maybe house arrest, losing his license, being laughed at online, maybe all of that will sink in someday. But whether he learns or not, the neighborhood won. We got our peace back. We showed him that actions, no matter how entitled you are, have consequences. And as for me, every time I look at the repaired paint on my car, I see more than just fresh polish. I see proof that justice, slow as it may crawl, eventually finds its way. And that brat, who once thought he owned the street with his BMW, now sits under watch, a prisoner of his own arrogance while the rest of us finally drive free.